In lesson 4.4, we're going to look at itemizing to estimate your expenses. So what does it actually mean to itemize your expenses? Well, you're going to use historical data to estimate the future expenses. You're going to look at both the frequency of the expense, meaning how often do you actually have that expense, and then you're also going to look at what was the actual amount of that expense. So these things that I've got listed here are things that aren't necessarily something that happens in the same amount and at the same time every single time, but we can make great estimates for when we budget. So for example, with car insurance, some people pay this monthly, but my family actually just pays it once a year. So I typically look at the prior year amount or a couple years of the prior year amount to estimate what I think I'll pay in the next year so I know how much money to save up for. Fuel. My kids play soccer during the summer and the fall. So during the summer and fall, I'm driving a lot more than when I'm driving during the spring or the winter. Car repairs, depending on the age of your car, may depend on how much money you're spending on it. Newer cars are just going to have things like the oil, or maybe you'll need new tires kind of early on, or replacing the brakes. But as you get an older car, a lot of times they need more repair work. College savings accounts or some kind of continuing education account that you may be able to kind of standardize and know how much you want to set aside. Clothing, typically we don't buy a lot of clothing unless we're going into a new season and we find that we need things. Sports and school activities will vary depending on the time of year or the type of activities we do. And you might be in a position where you're saving for a new car to yourself, and maybe you are wanting to improve your car, or maybe you're just concerned you're going to actually need a new car. So those would be things that you need to estimate, because they aren't going to be things that are like a monthly bill that comes to your house that's the same amount every month. Now, I would like to mention that it is very important to set aside money for each one of these items regularly, because these expenses arise immediately. Typically, like with car repairs, for example, if your car starts making a funny noise, you don't necessarily have a warning that something's going wrong with your car. So you want to regularly set money aside for these expenses that may arise, because if you don't, then you won't have the cash that you need to cover them. So this week we're only going to look at one practice problem to see how we would actually itemize some of these expenses or concerns for our budget. And we're going to do that kind of in practice. So here we have established a monthly budget for the following events. So the first one I have is I have income of $1,000 per month. And over here I've got all my categories listed, and I'm going to go on ahead and use this column to kind of type it in. So here my income is $1,000 a month. I'm going to start with that number right there. The next item I have is my tithe. I know that I'm going to give 10% of that income to God. So I can already take my $1,000 and I can say this is times 1,000, and I'm going to end up with $100. My savings account, I like to set 20% of my income aside for that. I'm going to take that times 1,000. That gives me $200. For fuel, though, it's not based off of a percentage. It says I estimate I'm going to use about 20 gallons per month, and it's going to cost me $5 per gallon. So in that case, I'm going to take 20. Over here, I'm going to take 20 times the $5, and that's going to give me $100. For car repairs, if I look back at the history, just kind of on what I've spent on car repairs, or maybe a parent helps you to say how much you think we'll spend a year, you can estimate how much you think you'll spend. So for the year, I estimate I'm going to spend $900. Well, I want to convert this into a monthly amount, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to divide it by 12, and that's going to give me $75 per month. Auto insurance, same thing. Maybe you've already paid for auto insurance, or maybe you haven't, but you need to estimate it. We're going to estimate it on a yearly basis instead of a monthly basis, because I pay mine per the year, so that's why I'm using that as my example. I'm going to take the $600 and I'm going to divide that by 12. So I know to set aside $50 a month to pay for my auto insurance. Buying a new car. I know that my car is going to die, so I want to set aside $900 a year to buy a new car. So here I'm going to take this, I'm going to divide this by 12, and that's going to give me $75. And then I also want to have a savings account where I set money aside to help me with college, maybe it's just general expenses for college, maybe it's paying for college, but I'm going to set money aside. I'm going to take this, and because it's on an annual basis, I'm going to divide that by 12 as well. And when I do, that gives me $200. The last item I've already been given on a monthly basis. So here I'm just saying, well, I estimate I'm going to spend about $100 overall on miscellaneous items. So I'm going to put my $100 on there. There's nothing I need to do to it because it was already given in monthly. Just like the income said, it was on a monthly basis. There was no conversion needed. After I do that, I can see how much money I have left over. If I'm over budget or under budget, I take my monthly income, I subtract off each one of these items, and when I do, I still have $100 left over.